So our first keynote speaker, or our keynote speaker, you find the details there, but I give you one more, and that is, well, Ed is saying, and I saw that yesterday at the dinners, the speaker dinner, he's definitely addicted to coffee. That is some personal details. The other detail is about his background. He is the co-founder of Cortana. If you don't know what Cortana is, then you might have an iPhone or you don't use the assistant. So an iPhone has Siri, Microsoft, or maybe other devices. When you want to have an assistant that is for all your devices, then you might want to use Cortana. And in our serious games context, it's pretty cool because that is an AI in a game called Halo. So that is an artificial intelligence assistant that helped the gamer to have a better experience. And without any further ado, I want you to welcome with me Ed Doran, who will present what he's doing at Microsoft Research. The stage is yours.
Thank you. I think I'm going to start a quick video and off we go.
Okay, cool.
Thank
Video,
you.
please.
Behind every great achievement, every triumph of human progress, you'll find people driven to move the world forward. People finding inspiration where it's least expected. People who lead with their imagination. But in an increasingly complex world, we face new challenges. And sometimes it feels like we've reached our limits. Now, with the help of intelligent technology, we can achieve more. We can access information that empowers us in new ways. We can see things that we didn't see before. And we can stay on top of what matters most. When we have the right tools and AI extends our capabilities, we can tap into even greater potential. Whether it's a life-changing innovation, being the hero for the day, making a difference in someone's future, or breaking down barriers to bring people closer together. Intelligent technology helps you to see more, do more, and be more. And when your ingenuity is amplified, you are unstoppable.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Ed Doran. I'm from Microsoft Research. I was really excited to come today because I think there's so many interesting things happening right now in this area of not only artificial intelligence, but the relationship between AI and gaming. And when they asked me to come to a keynote, I said, I'll do it under one condition. I want to talk about how we choose the best possible AI. And fundamentally, the way you do that, when you think about how complex it is to build artificial intelligence, and you think about how many things you can actually impact, you've got to decide what's the most important things. And to me, the most important things have to do with who we are as people, our empathy, our creativity, our industry. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is about AI, but I'm framing it in terms of how AI amplifies human ingenuity. So that's what's really interesting. And I think one of the things that I've really come to appreciate is people who work in games, particularly serious games, understand how to focus on the person who's playing them. They understand how to think the way they think, how to appeal to them. And so there's this wonderful opportunity to look at the intersection between artificial intelligence and the games for which we've developed and where we can apply it. So, for today, let's talk about AI. Now, it's really easy to talk about the technological piece of this. I'm fortunate, I work for Microsoft Research. We have labs all around the world, and everyone's building out new innovations every single day. And we all have it's easy for us to see the progress we make, that we can do speech, we can do vision, we can do all sorts of new things in our lives. But ultimately, the driver of all of these things are fundamental human needs. And I'll give you an example. I was doing research on sort of in-depth ethnographic research in China. So go to people's homes, how do they live, what's important to them, where could AI fit into their lives? And I was talking to this one person who was probably one of the coolest people I've ever met. He had his own dance crew, he chose his own music, he challenged other crews to contests, he sold tickets, he was an incredibly cool guy. And so I said to him, where does AI fit into your life? What could AI do for you that you just can't do today? And I was waiting for him to say things like, oh, help me discover new music, that'd be cool. Or help me create new music, that'd be cool, book a new venue, find people to challenge. These would all be cool things. And he thought about it for a minute, and then he said, help me know that my grandmother had a meal today. Help me know that my grandmother's left the house today. Now that's what's really cool. It's that he saw AI as an ability to make him easier to connect with the people he loved and to express his empathy for his family. So I think that's where the real inspiration for this comes from. How do we build AI that makes people's lives better? Now, when we have these conversations, we often have a number of discussions around what do we mean by artificial intelligence. In the simplest possible form, it's tech that allows us to perceive, learn, and reason. But the part that I'm most focused on in a way that extends the capabilities of people and organizations. This is the AI that's really important. And this is the AI we're going to focus on today. Now, I think it's a good time to talk about it because we've kind of hit this inflection point. We've been working on AI for decades, but we finally hit the point where the edge devices are thin enough and smart enough that they can do interesting things, where the networks are robust enough that we can actually work back and forth, and the cloud services are strong enough that we can start to hit human parity. And I'm giving you some examples here. Over the last 2 years, we've actually hit human parity in controlled studies, of course, for object recognition, speech recognition, machine reading, and machine translation. So we're actually at the point now where machines are getting good enough to join the conversation. And so the question becomes, what do you do with it? You start to package these things together so they fit naturally in your life. So when you're trying to get work done, you can leverage things like natural language interaction, that you can do speech recognition, that you can talk to your device, that you can do object or image recognition. There's the opportunity to begin this conversation between AI and people. And I think that's happening in pretty tangible ways. So what I'd like to do today is talk about 3 things. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about new innovations. I belong to Microsoft Research, so we really focus on what's next in AI. So I'm going to talk about some of the new things that are coming that'll soon be available, or some of the new breakthroughs we've had that we can share. 2, I'm going to talk a little bit about the platforms that we provide, because AI is great, but it really should be democratized. You should take those advances and make them available to the ecosystem so everyone can start to apply these technologies. And then I'd briefly talk about why we do AI and how to do AI in a trusted manner. Because it's not just what you can do, but how you choose to do the best thing that really matters. So, going into innovation, I think we've started to apply these technologies now in interesting ways, but you'll see them packaged together. So for example, we have something called Seeing AI. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to use it. It's a very simple app, but it has very sophisticated technologies. What it does is allow someone who has sight impairment, whether it's situational or temporary or permanent, to recognize things like their friends, but not only their friends, but the emotional state of their friends. So you can connect with them. That's a really powerful thing to do that leverages much of that work on sentiment analysis and image recognition. We've done a fair amount on Microsoft Translator as well. You can talk to someone on the other side of the planet, language you've never spoken, but you can connect, you can empathize, you can learn about each other. We have certainly published a fair amount of cognitive services. I'll talk about those later. Bing, and then my personal favorite, Cortana. This is a chance for us to make real the new technologies that we're putting out into the world. But today, let's talk about the really new things. I'm very fortunate. I'm going to be talking about things that were developed around the world, from Redmond, Silicon Valley, New York, Boston, Montreal, Beijing, Bangalore. This is a collection of thousands of scientists working on the next new thing. And I don't have a ton of time today, but I want to call out a few interesting ones that we have. Let's start at the beginning. More often than not, when you talk about AI, it's a deep computational conversation. And people talk about the application in ways that are also deeply analytical. I'm going to go a different direction. I have a number of friends and colleagues who are artists, and they like AI because they can write prose with it. They can write stories with it. And we have a whole set of object recognition people who are doing things that you can create new visual objects. So for example, you can take two things that are really quite different visually and teach them to combine together. We don't just mean add a lens to it or just a filter, but to have deep semantic understanding of the individual components of the image. And what that means is, when you translate one image into another, it actually makes sense. Objects are matched and then adapted into a new style. Something that was once realist becomes cubist, or vice versa. And if you do that in a really smart way, you can actually do it longitudinally, which means you can turn video into a completely different visual treatment and make it really easy. In some ways, this is advanced AI, but in other ways, it's what artists have always done, which is adapt their work into new styles as they move forward. And we think AI can make that easier and more compelling and more fun for a lot of artists. So we're playing with how we can do some of that object work. But sometimes it's not enough to actually go through and modify something. Occasionally, you want to actually create something entirely new. So I've got a friend who really loves birds, and he takes different pictures of them, but he can never get all the birds that he wants. So he actually taught his computer to create them. These are beautiful birds. They don't exist anywhere but here. This is a computer drawing a bird by his description. So he simply says, I'd like to see a small bird on a branch with blue feathers and a red belly, and it creates that bird. So a fundamental bit of art creates something from your imagination and make it real. And in this example, you're making all of these things real. And that's a pretty exciting thing for an artist to do. Let's go farther. Sometimes it's not enough to create things, sometimes you want to create an entirely new world. Now this is an area that serious gamers know better than anyone, right? Because it's fun to create those worlds and it's fun to interact with them. From an AI perspective, it's even more interesting to say, but what if you created that new world and you let the AI interact with them? So what if I create an entirely new world and then I let my AI learn within that world so I can apply it outside? We've done some interesting work where, for example, we taught AI how to navigate through factories, how to navigate through city streets, but we've also taught it how to navigate through savannas. We taught our AI to fly over the savanna and not only identify the endangered animals, but to identify the poachers who are chasing the endangered animals. So that then when you put drones out into the wild, they help conservationists. They can help protect the endangered animals that are out there, which you simply couldn't have done before if you hadn't trained some intelligence to assist you. So there's exciting things you can do here to adapt games into the new world by teaching them to train the AI. Of course, if you have a new world, then the really interesting thing is what's going on inside it. Now, as we all know, open or fairly constrained open worlds have an incredible amount of actions within them, an incredible amount of actors within them. Well, what if not only can you understand that world, but you can understand anomalies within that world? And so we've really focused there as well. What are the things that are unusual? So if I'm at home and I'm cooking, bursts of flame and smoke filling my house is probably usual. It's not a problem. If I'm not at home and there's flames and smoke, it's highly unusual. And we figured out ways that we can actually identify that at the edge through very lean hybrid compute, and then work with the cloud to trigger things when you identify those actions. So there's very interesting AI that not only creates the world, but actually can curate that world and things that are happening within it, in your home, in a factory, or someplace else. That's an interesting new field to play with. But of course, if you're going to start integrating things, the hardest thing to integrate are people, right? People are incredibly nuanced. It's hard to capture all of the things that are going on. One of the things I've found is, while it's easy to tell an AI system, hey, play my favorite music. I want to hear Icelandic death reggae. That's what I'm all about. But if in my car with my boss, well, and I say play my favorite music, I probably want something a little bit more professional, a little bit more well-rounded. So you need systems that understands people. In this system, we've actually published out to GitHub. It's open source. It's called a Platform for Situated Intelligence. It'll actually fuse together sound and camera and other types of input really seamlessly, and make it easy for developers to blend together all of those inputs and do something sophisticated on top of it. Because our goal is not just to create the sensors, but to create the platform that makes it easy to bring those things together. And Psi is an exciting example of that. But of course, let's go a little bit bigger. One of the best things about AI is when you start blending it together with mixed reality. And while it's interesting to understand your view of the world, what if you can capture the world? And so we've been developing systems now that allow you not only to see things from your perspective, but to capture the environment around you. That's pretty cool. What you can also do then is once you've captured that world around you in real time, you can start breaking the laws. You can freeze time. You can make time flow backwards. You can change objects, add objects, clone things that are near you, and create an entirely new experience. And in some ways for AI, that's perfect. It gives you a chance to create something that never existed, or to see the world in a way that you've never seen it. And so we think mixed reality and AI go together really nicely and create plenty of new opportunities. Now, the challenge with that though is once you're in that virtual or mixed reality, you need to interact with things. And there's been quite a bit of work around object recognition and synthetic objects, interesting work around sounds and 360-degree sound. We're actually starting to blend in haptics as well. So in this example, we've got an advanced bit that convinces you based on the haptics in your hands and the sounds you hear and the things you see that you're holding an object in your hands. And we can actually thump that object with a second virtual object, and you're pretty convinced you feel that interaction. Because it's incredibly immersive to go into a virtual world, to hear it and to feel it, but it breaks when you try to touch things that aren't there. When you can blend the visual, the auditory, and the tactile, you end up with a really immersive visual world that's fundamentally interesting and fundamentally great for something like a games experience, an educational experience, a teleportation experience, if you will, if you want to think about it in terms of communication. So that's kind of fun. And one more, of course, if you're going to touch things in the virtual world, well, our world isn't solely spheres and cubes, right? You actually have to have more complex objects, which means your intelligence has to understand the rules of the complex objects. Maracas move a certain way and make a certain sound in a particular orientation. Trombones, arrows, power drills. We're actually playing with how we teach AI to understand the rules of a virtual object so we can simulate a virtual object, which we think is really interesting in terms of driving that immersive experience once you're in the mixed reality world. So we've talked about a lot of stuff today. I think it's really interesting to share it because it gives us a chance to talk about what's next. We know that speech is moving along nicely and we'll continue to see growth there. Object recognition will continue to become more sophisticated, but it's these ability to bring the next thing forward, which is how do we bring together these interactions? How do we make them more sophisticated? And then how do we make them available to you? Because ultimately, it's not that interesting for a company to develop these things if they don't platformize them, if they don't democratize them. And so we're spending quite a bit of time building out things like either fundamental components. We've done a fair amount of announcements this week around FPGAs, where you can write your AI straight to the iron and do it quickly with high performance. But also, you have cognitive services. We've got about 750,000 developers in 60 countries using cognitive services to do what they want to do. Or our bot service, we have about 100 million people around the world interacting with our bots. In China alone, some of those interactions go as long as half an hour, where people are talking back and forth. They're so deeply engaged. And we've made that a platform so that you can adapt it and modernize it for your particular business. So I think that's the second piece of this, which is how do you expand the science, but then how do you make that science available to a larger community? And that gets me to this last piece. While we're trying to make everything as available as possible, I think it's important to do the right things. There's quite a bit of conversation around AI. People make a ton of predictions about the future, and some of those predictions are fairly sensational. The reality is, we are terrible at predicting the future. I think go back and reread the reviews of almost any new technology. There's a wonderful review that said that people would asphyxiate in trains because you were going too fast to breathe. Didn't really come to pass. What we're really good at, though, is we're really good at building the future. So I'm less focused on the predictions and more focused on how do we build a great future. And to do that, we're taking a few other steps. First, there have to be universal principles of AI. And as far as we're concerned, that means they're fair, reliable, safe, private and secure, inclusive, transparent, and accountable. This is the AI that we want to spend our time building. This is the AI we want happening on our platforms. And we're deeply committed to that. We also think that this isn't a one-person show. We formed the partnership with AI together with Google and Apple and Facebook, DeepMind, and a number of others to say, how do we work together to set the guidelines for this and make sure that we're building the best possible AI? And then most importantly, how do we make that real by building the right best possible experiences? We talked about seeing AI earlier, which is AI for people with sight limitations, but there's also a bunch of work we've done around students. How do you predict someone's falling off the path? How do you know to re-engage them as a teacher? As we said before, the world's getting increasingly connected and complex, and it gets harder and harder and harder to keep track of everything. How do we apply that towards education to help people move forward? We talked about inner eye in the video. Now, inner eye is really interesting. If you think about the job of a radiologist, and in particular, we focused on radiologists who are looking at brain tumors. So they have to look at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of slices of the person's brain and then carefully go through and identify the edges of the tumor. Now, these are extraordinarily dedicated people with incredible education. But if you compare day 1 to day 2, there's a 20% variance between the two. That's concerning. But we can teach our AI, in this case it's called inner eye, to go through and circumscribe that tumor and then arm the doctor with all of those slices with a 3-dimensional build. And they can modify it and they can adjust it and make it better. But what we find is doctors plus AI do better than either just doctors or just AI. And we think that cancer is a fantastic way to apply that technology. Finally, FarmBeats. A friend of mine works on this one. It's really just how do we make it cheaper to grow more and better food? There was a day when sensors were expensive, drones were hard to train, AI systems were rare and difficult to build. FarmBeats is really built around how do you make it easier for a farmer to make that food and take advantage of all this advanced tech without having to be an advanced tech person. Quickly, cheaply, effectively. These are the kind of projects that we want to work on, and this is where we really think we do a good job with AI. So I'm going to go back to this slide. When we talked in the beginning about artificial intelligence, I'm a geek, I love the stuff, it's easy for me to get drawn into the science, and we talked about object recognition and speech recognition and all these other things, but really the point was her, right? It's the talent in front of the screen. It's the person who decides, these are the projects we're going to go do. This is my vision of the world. This is my business that I want to go build. These are my challenges that I want to overcome. She's the one who makes the difference, and she's going to create the new world for AI. And so my call to you today, and my reason for being here is, I think we need everyone at the table. Because if you're a marketer, you know your customers better than anybody, right? If you're a business owner, you know the problems that you want to solve more than anybody. If you have a unique perspective on life, you know a problem that's not getting solved by AI that should be. And we know that we will not get better AI unless it's much more inclusive. That means more inclusive training sets, more inclusive people at the table, more inclusive questions being asked. And so I'm thrilled to be here. I'm excited for the conversations that are going to happen. And I want to thank you for your time. I think it's going to be a great conference. So, thank you.
Ed, thank you so much. I want to add this. Ed will stay with us for the panel discussion at the end. So if you have any questions, I encourage you to save them for later. I have a bit of questions because you gave me some time before we have our next speaker. Out of curiosity about your background, how did you get into this field?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm a scientist by training. And I have a particular interest in the intersection between technology and people. I don't believe the technology is ever going to be perfect. It can just be better at serving people. I'll give you an example. Back in the early days, we built a little prototype to try to make natural language better. So to do that, I wanted to be able to say things like, remind me to pick up some milk on my way home from work. That sounds like a simple question, but what it really means is you have to know when work is, when I'm leaving work, where I buy my milk, where home is, so that I can go do that. So we built this AI to follow me and my friends around and figure out what those things were. And it worked fantastic until you looked closer at it. And so when we looked closer at it, my developer lead, it turned out that the place he called home was a bar. He called it a bar because he was there every day. He was there from midnight to 2 a.m. He didn't move around a whole lot. He was incredibly habitual about it. And by the way, he was a fantastic developer. It wasn't bad. But the point is, that AI was very well designed and very well constructed, but it was never going to be right for him unless he had the ability to correct it. So in that case, he called it the office and told it where its real home was.
That was the office.
Yes, well, he would tell me he's going to the office and I'd believe him, so.
Okay, so you're making AI smarter every day.
Yep.
Where do you draw the line, what they can do and what we do?
I think that's a great question. I think at the end of the day, people have to be in charge. AI is fantastic as an assist, but ultimately you have to make the decision. If you're an artist, I have a friend who builds visual art with artificial intelligence. She has to decide, go this direction, go that direction, this one's better. If you're someone who's really focused on productivity, AI can help you be more productive, but sometimes you just say, time out. I don't want to be more productive right now. I'd like to take a break, visit my friends, do something else. So ultimately it's about empowering people. It's up to them to decide.
But some people fear that we can't stop AI. I think maybe we'll talk about that later at the panel discussion. I have another question for you.
Okay.
So AI and interaction, where is that going? Where do you see that going?
AI and interaction. So I think when you and I talk, there's a lot going on. You can hear each other's voices, we make eye contact, we nod, I say something stupid, you shake your head, but there's an incredible amount of interaction going back and forth. The future of that interaction with AI is AI has to learn that. It's not just speech, it's speech and context and intonation. If you do straight translation of words, it doesn't make sense.
You have a great example for that, I'm sure. I'm sure.
I might have one. So, for example, if you translate word for word, a butt dial and a booty call are the same thing.
A butt dial and a booty call.
Yes, but in reality, extraordinarily different things. Teaching AI the nuance of human communication, sarcasm, wit, humor, it's going to take a long time, but it'll be worth it.
That's actually what is missing from AI now, I guess.
Humor's tricky. I struggle with it myself.
Oh, nobody would. Anyways, you showed us a lot of new technology. Where can we see more information about that?
Sure. So Microsoft Research is a research org. So we publish all of our work in academic journals. We publish a lot of what I showed today, but in much more detail on the Microsoft Research blog. And we do publish a fair amount of it in GitHub. So if you're a drone person, go grab AirSim off GitHub and have fun with it. If you're a sensor fusion person, go grab PSI, the platform for situational intelligence, off GitHub and play with it. We really think that our job is to push the science, and the end part of that is always engaging an ecosystem around that science.
As I still have a bit of time, I didn't ask you that last night, but I was really curious to know your vision on the humanoid robots. We will talk later with Jeanette from Bosch about robots. What do you, because you're saying humans and artificial intelligence, it is a combination. Humans have to be the ones who are driving that. What do you think about the humanoids robots?
I think there's a ton of work to be done to make AI serve people well. I'm not really focused right now on having AI pretend to be human, rather more to be authentically digital and avoid that uncanny valley that can happen when you try to be too human. But I think there's an incredible amount humans can teach AI around patience, empathy, creativity, which frankly is new science. And that's something we need to work on going forward.
But I think it's already in science since 20 years or so, right?
Empathy?
Yeah, well, not in robotic science, not in computer science. When I talk with my colleagues in our institute, they didn't really take those people serious, the people who work on humanity and in psychology and so forth. And what you said earlier was actually what the word that popped in my head was interdisciplinarity. Mm-hmm. You said bring everybody to the table.
Right.
So there are so many scientific fields that could all work together, right, to make artificial intelligence better.
I think we'll have to. We have some brilliant thinkers, not just economists, but people who focus on ethics and philosophy, and that's helpful in terms of how we choose to do the right AI. Let me give you an example. If you go through and look at the word mappings that we use to teach computers about what words mean and how they fit together, there was a while there when you'd look up something and look to doctor and find it was closely associated with men, and nurse was closely associated with women. Now, there's nothing in that word that's actually gender specific. So
I know
AI was actually reflecting a bias in the community it was learning from. So when you work with ethicists and philosophers, they teach you to look for those core issues so that we can fix them, we can adjust for them, so that AI helps us but doesn't replicate our biases.
Well, basically AI learns from what we feed it with, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that makes kind of sense that we also integrate ourselves into this discussion. And I thank you so much. We see you later for the panel discussion, and we have also more time for questions from the audience. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks.